Thank you for tuning in to the BizNation podcast. My name is Kerry Zarb, and I've been helping business owners just like you go from headache to heaven in a heartbeat for over 20 years. I'll be giving you all the top advice for getting started in your business, but I'll also be speaking with some of the best business minds to inspire you with valuable insights to help you get ahead in your business. If you've ever hit a roadblock or lost your passion, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the BizNation podcast. I'm your host, Kerry Zarb, and today I have an incredible episode for you. Roman Prokopchuk from Nova Zora Digital is joining us to discuss digital marketing in your business. Having over 13 years experience in digital marketing, Roman has joined us today to speak of his marketing experience. This is going to be a hectic deep dive into many different aspects that Roman can help us with. Join me on today's podcast as we deep dive into digital marketing, all things SEO, and really get some great advice from Roman. So Roman, I don't even know what you do, buddy. Like, I know it's digital marketing, but I've got no clue what like your clients, who you serve, tell me what happens in Roman's world of digital marketing.
Yeah, so I've been in digital marketing since 2008, self-taught. Basically, an opportunity presented itself. I was working out at the gym. Somebody basically said, "Come out to my car. Let me give you something," which could have went different ways in terms of the conversation. But they opened their trunk, handed me a packet about search engine optimization, and said, "Learn this. Take another month or two, go online, and you can start doing this for my business." So I had nothing to lose. It was a new kind of skill to develop. So I kind of took that chance. So I started with search engine optimization. And then a few months later, funny story, first business lesson, the person's cat got cancer. They had to pay $20,000 for the cat, and they said, "Sorry, we can't pay you, but you can put your resume out there and see who kind of picks you up or that's interested." So it was like, the con was, I didn't get paid, but the pro, I got that experience. And then I got hired by a company called LexisNexis Martindale Hubble, which is like a 50,000 person company. And then they got acquired by a company called Reed Elsevier, publisher out of the UK. So I basically handled digital marketing, mainly SEO for law firms in the US, small, medium, large size law firms. And then as I stayed there, I got bigger clients. So anyone spending $100,000 with the company or more. And then I had kind of one of the elite portfolios, which was kind of 7-figure spend for search engine optimization, content strategy, paid search, and social media. And then I saw
Wow.
obviously the internet evolving and different pieces coming into play. Social media was in its infancy. So how can I incorporate social media, paid search, local search, and other kind of mechanisms of digital marketing? And I think everybody should have a core competency. That's your strength. Mine is search engine optimization. But as the internet was evolving, learning other things where I can obviously help people drive the right kind of client base and visibility online. I worked in a lot of verticals, anywhere from small businesses over time. So I worked with a wide range of clients. And then in 2012, I founded my agency, Nova Zora Digital, which focuses on digital marketing, basically drawing and figuring out where your audience is, and then reaching them and convincing them why they should obviously choose you for whatever you're doing over your competitors, the proper branding and gaining visibility online. So it's kind of, some agencies have that kind of a cookie cutter approach where it's, this is the model, let me like stamp this out for every client, but it's really, meeting with the client, doing kind of a preliminary audit where they are, what are kind of toxic things that need to be fixed, especially with search engine optimization that might have not been done properly, because search engine optimization is kind of the on-site elements, the content strategy, off-site in terms of the backlink profile, who's linking to you, and kind of technical, how your site is built, how it's performing, how it's coded, that kind of thing. So there is about 200 to 300 ranking factors for a website to show up for a specific thing for a specific page. And obviously that's a lot of work. Obviously some things are more important than others. But in 13 years, I've worked with about close to, at this point, like 700 companies or so, and different types of campaigns, managed a bunch of teams, held 3 director roles on the agency side. So I kind of have ran the gambit in digital marketing at this point.
You've just blown my mind to a whole new level. Like that's incredible. I can't believe this started with someone in a car park with an offer. What the hell? That doesn't happen, does it? Is this normal?
I mean, it is when you take opportunities. So I think sometimes opportunity arise in business or whatever, personal, or if you're investing in something, let's say real estate, and it's one of those things where it's you think to yourself, this may not come along again, but you may not be ready to take it. But in that moment, you should take it and then accelerate your learning and kind of get yourself up to speed, so then you can handle it and be equipped to do so. Because I know a lot of people get kind of scared of the moment, kind of like stage fright in a way, and then an opportunity passes them and they may not get that. And that opportunity, that one person, even though that lasted for 2 months, and obviously from the business sense, I didn't necessarily get compensated because of that situation, it opened door after door after door. And then I was the one that applied myself and took it further and further. But that first door may or may not open if you don't take that opportunity. If you think you're not ready, jump into it. The worst you can, do is move on to something else and it doesn't work out.
I can't believe though, like this space for you, this is incredible because when you started this 13 years ago, so much changes. Like, does it change every 6 months, every year? Like, you're constantly learning, relearning, and adapting to new algorithms and things. Is that right?
Yeah, so with search engines, obviously, like you mentioned, there's algorithms. At this point, there's like core algorithm updates. But there, in terms of search engine optimization, there's only 4 things that will influence, where you're positioned in terms of your website, how it shows us up in search. So you do something to your website, a competitor does something to their website, search trends change. So meaning, this term or phrase got 100,000 searches this month globally, and for some reason, maybe it's seasonal, then it dropped off to 20. Or algorithm changes, like you mentioned. So those 4 things influence anything outside of that. There's really nothing there.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to paint a bit of a picture here of with the SEO side of things, and I apologize, I just know nothing about this because I've not had time to get involved in. I think it was on the to-do list for this year. So the words that I put in all of my copy on my website, including the metadata on the back end of any images or anything like that, that all counts, right?
Yep, that counts. It counts differently. Like you said, images, I would encourage you to have alt tags that describe obviously the image, meta titles, meta descriptions, obviously the titles of the actual pages, descriptive and to the point URL structure of specific pages or posts, the content itself, the variations of the content, the thematics, how you use the words and phrases and sentences in conjunction to each other. So, for example, with thematics, and there's something called latent derelict allocation. So, let's say you want to rank a page for Batman, but you talk about like where he's from, the villains he fights, and everything else, and you don't mention Batman, you will maybe most likely, if the site is strong and that page, the domain authority and the page authority is already there, you have a good chance of showing up because that's already kind of alluded to. That's kind of the next thing that you're bringing about. But obviously, I would recommend obviously mentioning the thing or going more in depth about what you're trying to show up for. But there are opportunities where it's like the relationship of content and how things relate to one another on the page itself that's important as well.
You're listening to the BizNation podcast. I would love to connect with you outside of the podcast, and you can find me on Clubhouse, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn by searching my name, Kerry Zarb, or directly on my website at kerryzarb.club. And don't forget, if you need more support in your business, you can find the community on Facebook at BizNation Support Group. So, Roman, what if I can't write copy? Like, I'm not a writer, and that's just not one of my strong points as well. the copy that I put down, is it more about the keywords, or does the sentences have to, like, is there strategy in the copy itself?
Well, I mean, I would encourage you to write to the user first because, back in the day, people were chasing search engines and optimizing for search engines. When I got into it, it's kind of like the Wild West. People were like keyword stuffing. So it's like, okay, the amount of times you mention something. So people were putting the same term like 30 pages. There was a meta keywords tag that's like useless at this point. They were just stuffing keywords in there that held value. And it's one of those things where, something's too good to be true and then everybody ruins it and then it's gone for everybody else. So hiding content, so like cloaking content where you can't see and making it invisible, but it's on the page. So just a lot of spammy kind of, it's called black hat stuff. But writing, I would write to a user in mind. I would obviously incorporate the things you're looking for. I would do topical and keyword research, mainly to understand what the difficulty is. So you may have ideas of writing between three different things or using different variations of the same thing, like word or topic. But one of those may be less competitive, still have a same amount of search volume, and then obviously like less results that you're competing with, like I mentioned. So you'd want to incorporate that because it's still searchable, but you would probably have an easier time if you did everything else right to show up for that over the other two things that I mentioned. Obviously it's going to take time, but you have that opportunity. So I would write for the end user in mind. Obviously structure is important. So, bulleted lists, number lists, headings. So primary heading, secondary heading, things of that nature to really break it down and really making that content as easily consumable as possible and try to incorporate kind of your main point, get to the point what the purpose of that page is in the beginning, because oftentimes you only have obviously a few seconds to convey what that page is about or what you're trying to give to that person or provide in terms of value when they land on that page. So incorporating whatever you have in terms of importance in the beginning, opening paragraph, and then working your way down and then obviously having a call to action as well.
So, with that in mind, we could consider almost like an elevator pitch method in that first paragraph, that we want to get to the point, we want to capture their attention because they've come to the site for a reason. You need to give them that reason pretty punchy. Would that make sense?
Yeah, it's like a thesis statement. So this is why, we're the best, or like we're the best for search engine optimization. Let me tell you more. And then you do the rest of the page in convincing, giving social proof, possibly adding case studies, adding testimonials, really making that page robust in terms of convincing someone why they should obviously take the next step in terms of email you, call you. If you have a live chat feature on your site, do that. However way you have in terms of communication, really convincing them in order for them to make that decision, because obviously usually people need like 6 or 7 points until they actually contact you, and providing as much of that proof on the page itself and links to it shortens that funnel, in my opinion, most times.
Yeah. I want to ask you two other things that are really important here. The first one that comes to mind before I forget is, what about if I publish an article or a blog post, but then I want to put that somewhere else? Say someone reaches out to me for a media opportunity to publish an article or something on their website. What are the traps about duplicating our content across different platforms?
Yeah, duplicate content would devalue your original if there's something that doesn't attribute to the original. So let's say if you ever wrote a thesis paper or a research paper back in a day in school, you have to provide sources, things of that nature. I would encourage, if you have that opportunity, creating unique content or, synthesizing what you had on your website or having a variation and then referring to it. So then you can bring them back, if possible, back to your site and not keep them and have that as a referral traffic opportunity. But let's say it's being syndicated or you have some kind of relationship where they want that specific piece. I would first make sure and check in terms of your search console and do basically a site command for that specific page and see if it's already indexed. If you go into your Google Search Console, you will see if that page is indexed or if there was any indexation issues. So having that as like the original, so like that was first indexed, that variation of that page. And then if it is being put on another site, I would then encourage them or tell them, or else you shouldn't really do it, like a cross-site rel canonical tag that basically, site and then the canonical tag pointing back to that original. So basically, when it's crawled, it states that, this is a variation of this original page. So it's not viewed as duplicate content.
Because my understanding, and I only looked at this briefly at some stage throughout the pandemic, was that if you just pick up an article and put it on your site and then send it to someone else's site, it's not a good thing, right? Like that's not,
No,
no?
I mean, it should be unique to begin with. Like, I wouldn't encourage that. I just had a company I work for, they basically scraped the whole site and threw up the whole site, replaced all their name of the company and plugged their own name, and then created forms to portals like login for products and software. And that form was like a mirror page where it would capture your information and they would steal those logins. But then I had to track that down. Like the company was registered in Panama, which obviously is registered in Panama for a reason. You can't necessarily get anything done. So there are a lot of malicious situations where people just kind of scrape your content and duplicate it in that sense, which you can kind of submit a takedown request to Google and, take other steps. But if you're having an opportunity like a media publication, I would create unique content for that just so they get a unique experience to begin with. So if you have something show up on your site in terms of a blog post or another piece of content, I would personally prefer and would recommend that be the only variation out there of that piece of content.
Yeah, that makes sense. My next question was, I've got WordPress. So my site is all WordPress. That's the only place I've ever lived other than years ago. When I go onto WordPress, I've got a plugin that tells me what my blog post is giving me on an SEO kind of score level. I guess my first question is, what's your recommendation for WordPress SEO plugin? What's the best one that you've seen that we can work with? Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, Yoast and then all-in-one SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just giving you like that's easing up the process. So like tools you have to work with within that obviously make it easier, but I wouldn't be necessarily fixated on that score. Sometimes people have it activated and it's a low score. I mean, I can still get those pages to rank. It's just one of those things where they want it done their way and they're looking at certain specific elements. And if it's not the way that they're kind of like measuring it, they're not going to obviously look at it favorably. But that's not necessarily the end of the world. If you have your on-site kind of shored up, if you have internal links, if you're using the right anchor text in terms of internal links and not being kind of spammy and overusing things, if you have headings set up, H1s, H2s, H3s properly, if the length of your content, if the actual URL matches, what the topic and the title of the page is. So it's just having those elements kind of on site shored up. So it doesn't necessarily mean if you have a high score that you will necessarily show up favorably, but it is a good kind of framework to follow because it's in a way best practice.
What about cross-linking? And I don't know if that's the right term for it, but say, for example, I've got my website and I work with someone, or I'm part of another organization. What about if like I put their website on my website and they put my website on their website? Should we be doing that? How often? Is that a good thing?
There's something in terms of like what your ranking could possibly be and the health of your website and the strength of your website in terms of domain authority, in terms of offsite. So your backlink profile. So all the sites that are linking back to you, how relevant they are, their domain authority, where they're hosted. Yes, you can link back to them, but ideally, I'm not saying don't, but you should want them to link back to you first.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you should. But then there's something in terms of backlinks, no follow and follow. Follow, you kind of pass that SEO juice, like people call it, directly. But if you make a link no follow, it's still a link, but it doesn't necessarily like pass that full SEO value. I don't dissuade if somebody's willing to link to you, especially a big site. So like, let's say you have Inc. magazine do an article about you. They will have a backlink. If they do include it, it will be no follow, because I mean, it's a strong site. They're not necessarily going to pass that value. And usually that's the best practice for bigger sites. They'll give you a no follow link, but it's not bad because a natural backlink profile has a mix of no follow and follow links. Because if you only have follow links, it's not going to look like an organic, backlink profile, and you shouldn't necessarily be forcing that envelope in that sense anyway. So there's that in terms of linking. And then there's also, like, if you're linking back to each other and the businesses make sense, both of you have opportunities for referral traffic. And that referral traffic can then lead obviously to business. So a lot of the time, like if somebody says, I'll give you a link, but it's no follow, don't be upset about that, because you could do additional research and background research on that website. So I use specific tools that basically give me competitive analysis. Like I can spy on what ads they're running, how much they're spending, what keywords their sites are showing up for, what obviously sites are linking to them, and what the traffic looks like. And if that site that's giving you that no follow link gets maybe 100, 200, 300,000 visits a month, the opportunity for you to get traffic, referral traffic to your site is high if they keep that piece of content on their website. So you have that as an additional traffic source. And you can only imagine if you have a solid offsite strategy, you build these relationships, you get hundreds of websites that make sense, that theoretically are from like qualified communities that would be maybe your target audience or a potential client that you're looking for. You have the opportunity to build that continuous traffic from a referral traffic source over time. And if that stays there, that's only kind of multiplying over time.
Is there any kind of time limit that we make changes to our website for these backlink opportunities?
Nope. I mean, you can make any change to your website. Obviously, it's recrawled and identified. It's not one of those things like, oh, my site or my page isn't good enough for this, this website to link to. Let me fix it. There's no negative impact. I mean, over time, search engines and kind of like crawl bots, if you want to SEO spiders, different words in terms of when your site, when the bot theoretically lands on your site and recrawls the site and updates the index, Google's index or whatever search engine that obviously that that website or those pages are going on, because obviously your site is on multiple search engines. It assumes that your site will be updated over time, and updating a website isn't a bad thing. It's obviously refreshing it, updating information that may have changed. Obviously, if you have products or services, if those change, you need to update. So updating your website at any time isn't a bad thing. It's not going to negatively impact you in any way.
And one thing that I understand in this whole website space is that we should update. We shouldn't just make our website and leave it there for like 12 months. And I think this is why a lot of people encourage us to write blog articles and have that blog page available. Roman, what's your tip on how often we should be doing that? If we do nothing else on our site, how often should we be publishing a blog?
Like you said, I think it's important to have fresh content on your website. And obviously, in terms of a WordPress format, you have posts and pages. So a blog post, I would encourage anyone to obviously do a post. In terms of frequency, it's what you're able to do, just like obviously podcasting, what you're comfortable with and what you kind of can maintain. But just don't simply say, I'm going to do 20 this month and then I'm going to do one. But regardless of that cadence, why are you writing that piece? Having a content strategy. What value is it adding? Is it something that's going to deliver value? Is it searchable? Are you targeting a long tail variation of, something that you already have on your website or anything of that nature? So I think it's important to know your why before you write, and not simply just write for the sake of writing.
Yeah, so quality over quantity.
Yep. I mean, you're going to go a lot further when you add value over if you have, 50 pieces. And that's another thing. If you simply write with no kind of purpose, oftentimes the bounce rate of those pages or posts are high. And the bounce rate is kind of one factor in terms of, how your site performs. So let's say you end up on the first page of Google, another search engine, Bing, what have you. Usually I'm talking about Google because they have market share, in the US and a lot of countries around the world. So basically, if you get on the first page and then over time your bounce rate goes up, meaning somebody lands on a specific page and then doesn't click to anything else on your site, stays on that one page and then leaves. The higher it is, the worse it is. So the closer to 100, the worse off in terms of what your website is being and how it's being consumed. So when you have a high bounce rate and you're on the first page and you continue it, most likely than not, you're going to start being dropped off and kind of like positioned down in sites that have a lower bounce rate that are similar to yours, because Google's assuming that if you have a bounce rate, whatever you ranked for, you're not adding value, you're not delivering the answer or the solution or the sale or the product. So they'll replace you with somebody else because they want to create the best user experience and websites that have the most value and the most relevant websites on that first page. And by you obviously not connecting in that way, but being on the first page, regardless if you're doing everything else, you're going to eventually over time consistently, which I've experienced in multiple sites, consistently drop off unless you rework what you're doing on the website, redo the content, possibly reposition some of the elements so you have more engagement on the site itself.
I'm following. There's a lot to this, Roman. Oh my God, this is huge. I don't know how you keep up with this. Just this one, like the whole website SEO is just a beast in itself, right? Like this is massive.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's very tedious. So a lot of the time, like a company will come to me, I'll audit. They'll probably pay me for the audit. I mean, there's been times where I consulted out. So let's say there's an agency that's better at something else, maybe video production or video optimization or video ads or media buys or something like that, but they offer search engine optimization. So they have clients, but they have no clue what they're doing. So they may just, optimize titles, descriptions, and do a few other things on site, but don't necessarily like focus on everything and have a cohesive strategy. So I've had, when I went in to another agency, I was on site really editing and vetting all their clients and then like presenting findings, training all their teams and things of that nature to better deliver value to their clients. So it is very tedious. And oftentimes, like I said, when I get a client, it's really fixing things and getting to position like zero. So they're like in the negative because they have a lot of stuff broken on the site. They have like bad domains, like toxic domains linking to their site. They may have incurred a penalty that they're not showing up because, their site's penalized, figuring that. So a lot of it is, I feel like I'm like like a CSI person, like a forensic detective,
Mm.
really kind of figuring out and identifying what really is toxic and then presenting that, fixing it, getting it to a point where then it could be positioned and ranked for and perform, and then undertaking that. So oftentimes there's like the cleanup and then there's the actual strategy. So you're right, it's very time consuming. Like in terms of services offered, that is the highest margin for me because it's the biggest like man hours and actual tactical planning and strategy for me as well.
Roman, I'm picturing you in the full like camo gear, like on your stomach and doing this like crawl thing. Like this is what I picture when I think of you and this process. Oh man, it's intense. I'm scared. I'm actually scared right now because I don't think I even want to start diving into this as a small business owner and thinking about my SEO and my website. I'm frightened. I'm actually frightened. And I think the biggest thing is like lack of knowledge, obviously, number one. Number two is, engaging someone that I can trust to help me with this because there's so many. We get it in our inbox every single day. Someone's like, I've been on your website and I've noticed XYZ. There's just too many of them. How do we know who's going to do a good job and how do we trust someone that's going to look after us and not just take our money and do nothing because we have no clue, we have no way of knowing if they did a good job? What's your advice? Please help.
Oh, they should have results, like proven results, a results driven approach, not like, hey, I can get you on page one in 30 days. That's one of the biggest red flags. If you're given a time, uh, usually they're doing things that aren't reputable, that will probably get your site penalized, or holding to a date like that. Like you can give a range depending on after you look at a site, how old that domain is, how healthy that domain is, what the domain authority, and obviously auditing it to a certain extent and understanding how it performs, then you get an idea of what that client wants and is it doable. So, they can want, I often say a lot of clients have like a Honda budget, but like Lamborghini goals. So
Yeah.
like, they may want a car that's, 10, $15,000, but they look in terms of getting the results of something that's like imported for like $400,000. So like
Yep.
setting expectations and goals, like this is where you're at. And then also doing a deep dive on competitors. So like they would identify three, four, five, maybe who they think their direct competitors are. And, they'll often say, obviously, we're better than them. We're doing things XYZ better. But then evaluating that, maybe your website is 2 years old and your competitors is 15 years old. So that's something you have to overcome because the what am I looking for? What word? The the age, there you go. The age of the
Mm-hmm.
domain, it has been a long day, is one of those things that's a ranking factor. Obviously, it's not number one, but something that's been around 15 years over two, you have that kind of established space there.
Roman, what's your top tips for tools for getting started other than WordPress and what we spoke about before? What should we do to get started on SEO? Is there any tricks or tips you can give us?
Yeah, there's a lot of websites. I mean, there's websites like Moz.com. It used to be SEO Moz. So there's a lot of like frameworks for beginners, like explaining everything, explaining ranking factors, explaining content strategy, link building, things of that nature. Then there's a lot of tools, industry tools, individual tools. I've been using a tool called SEM Rush for 11 years at this point. So you can track your website. You can give it gives you ideas for content. You can do different content analysis. You do different kind of like SWOT analysis between you and your competitors. It'll track your website in terms of kind of ranking. So you can input specific keywords. You can track directly from that. You get competitive analysis to see if your clients are running ads, what ads they're running, their ad copy. If you put another kind of website in, you see their organic and paid traffic over time and which keywords drove it. So you can see the keyword, you can see the matched URL. So what specific page ranked for it. So then you can go to it, see, possibly get ideas, do it better. So SEM Rush, I use a all-in-one widget-based dashboard for a lot of clients and myself. It's called Cyphe, CYFE. So basically, it takes a lot to go into all these different places and look at analytics and other moving parts. So basically, you can sync up like all aspects of what you're doing, kind of like your CRM, your mail server, sync up all your social accounts so you can see all the analytics in one place. Obviously, Google Analytics, if you're running Google Ads, if you're running ads on different social media platforms, and kind of other data points. You can basically tie in different servers directly real time and feed data that way, and then create the meaningful widgets that you want to see. So you can see everything in one kind of ecosystem. So connect the dots a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I use is called Hotjar. It's basically adding a component of heat maps and then session recordings to your website. So then you can better understand how people are interacting with your website and possibly understand where the bottlenecks a little bit better. Because if you do search engine optimization, that's half the battle. So you show up number one for everything you want, you're getting that traffic, but people are still dropping off. So that conversion rate optimization comes into play, moving different elements, moving your forms around. If you have a video, possibly moving where that video is, moving content around, and then A B testing in terms of how people engage and interact with that. And then hopefully, obviously, driving that engagement rate up and the rate of obviously sales or phone calls or form submissions as well. So you're doing conversion rate optimization at that point for specific keyword tracking or topical tracking. It's called AWR Cloud, so Advanced Web Rankings. It's one of the most cost effective. So basically, You put a keyword set in there, baseline, and you track it over time. You can track one search engine, multiple search engine, within local search if you're a local business. So you can do that versus your competitors. So that's something I mentioned today. Obviously, in Clubhouse, Uber suggests if you want to do a little bit of keyword research, you can use the Google Keyword Planner. If you have ran something in terms of a paid campaign, you're able to use it. Before it was kind of free for everyone years ago, but now if you have to have an active campaign running to use that kind of feature. For social content, I mentioned also BuzzSumo. So it's really seeing what content is performing, and out of that, you're going to get a lot of blog posts and content like that, fresh content that's going viral. So you can take a look and possibly, obviously, get ideas or replicate that as well.
Holy snap, Roman. Honestly, mate, that's a lot of stuff. Do you recommend that we can DIY of the time learning investment versus just finding someone that's going to help us with this? What's your recommendation?
I always encourage that for anything, just because you get an idea so you can understand and be better suited in terms of picking someone and really kind of grading or evaluating the work they did. Because oftentimes people, get screwed over and like, yeah, they seem so good. And then, but you have to know what you're looking for. So I would at least be as versed enough in terms of an intermediate level. So understand like what's involved, how it's connected, understanding how to like possibly like score or rank content in terms of, if they hit or miss the mark in terms of the strategy itself. So just understanding the framework, and I think it would be beneficial in general, even though you're going to have somebody else do it because you want them to do it to the best of their abilities. The same thing with social, paid search, paid social. If you have somebody doing your analytics and putting reports together, really understanding that concept and then having someone do it. I mean, I do that for everything. I try to, and reverse engineer. Maybe that's why I kind of have had longevity in digital marketing, because like I want to reverse engineer it and just do it myself, even though that may not be my expertise. I want to at least
Hmm.
have working knowledge. So even if you are a small business, I would invest at least a little bit of time, so you at least know, because you may not be outsourcing it for a long time. You may bring that in house. You may have to show somebody else. You may have to take on that hat because maybe you're not able to pay for that anymore. So having that initial framework will help you in the long run.
Definitely. And Roman, another question on the back of that, and it's going to be very different what you answer here because you're in the States versus those listening in Australia, but what's the price range in the States in comparison? What's the norm?
Well, that's the thing we also spoke about. Some people will do a component of SEO and call it SEO and your site is optimized, but it's an ongoing effort. It's not like an on
Mm.
and off switch, and it's the on site, off site, and technical. So it depends. I mean, I've seen people charge as low as, $500, but how are they billing? Are they billing in like a overall work? Are they billing on the project? Are they billing hourly? I've the most someone has paid for something that I've managed either personally for my company or in general. One company was paying $50,000 a month just for SEO for their properties. So that's an idea. Usually, if you're a small business and you want like a fair price, and it's like not everything, and it may be only, I would say it's only 8 to 10 hours a month really spent on your website. I would say like 1,000 to like 1,500 American dollars, honestly, to get somewhat reputable kind of service. And a lot of the time, coming from an agency and working at 3 or 4 other agencies before obviously founding my own, I know that kind of back end and how people work. So there's a handful of people working on dozens, sometimes hundreds of accounts. So how much time is really spent on yours? You don't have a dedicated person usually. So that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes maybe you find a good freelancer that has that personal relationship over an agency. Sometimes an agency has a good relationship where they're very personable and they care about your business like it's their own or like it's your own. So finding that and building that relationship and that trust is key. A lot of the times, a lot of people have tarnished the digital marketing industry. So people have had like snake oil salesman kind of experiences to begin with, and that puts a bad taste in their mouth. But really understanding what you're getting and really like seeing a contract. Some people have very general and generic contracts that's like, we'll do X. Like really having like the bullet things and understanding what is being done. And like that comes back to understanding and having kind of a base understanding, because if you see all those things and they're charging 10x what it should actually be, and maybe they're saying it takes 10 hours, but for a fact that it takes a half hour, you can either call them out or go elsewhere, and that will avoid being screwed over or losing money in the long run.
Yeah, great advice. Love it. If anyone wanted to get in contact with you, do you service small businesses, and where can we find you?
So my website's novazoradigital.com. I'm on every social media platform that's out there for the most part, I think. So it depends, obviously. Like I said, I've been doing it for 13 years. Like my billable rate per hour is usually high for small businesses. I mean, obviously there's industries that have marketing budgets dedicated, but I'm willing, regardless of your budget, have a 15-30 minute conversation to at least point you in the right direction, because I hate people getting screwed over. It's the situations we talked about, people charging or overcharging or not delivering value. So at the very least, doing kind of a quick evaluation and pointing that person in the right direction. But some businesses, if it makes sense, specifically, like I've specifically consulted where my agency doesn't necessarily do the work, but shows you how to do it, does trainings, consulting hours over time, that kind of thing. So it's really like dependent on what a specific I guess business is looking for, and sometimes that is lucrative as well at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that so much. I'm going to pop those links into the show notes so that everybody can find you. Roman, I just want to thank you for coming on to the show. This has been a mind-blowing exercise, but a fantastic one at the same time. I think there's so much that you've shared with us. And for the listeners that have tuned in, oh my God, I hope you had a pen and paper to write down all of those cool things. But I will put many of Roman's tips, links into the show notes for you as well. So Roman, thank you so much for your time. It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. And this is just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, I guess the saying is.
It
So
is.
yeah, I mean, I can talk about this all day, and it gets a little technical at times, and I have to kind of think about it and tone it down, because I have to remember not everybody is in my field. But it's not as daunting. It's really figuring out where you need to start, and then getting those things kind of shored up, and slowly but surely, if you're working on your website, you're doing the things that need to be done, eventually kind of your domain authority will rise, and the visibility of your content in search engines will follow as well.
Awesome. Thanks again, Roman. Really appreciate it. I'll chat to you really soon.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to the BizNation podcast. It was lovely to share this episode with you. Remember to subscribe to catch all future episodes, and I would also very much love it if you'd leave me a rating or a review. Until next time, remember that you can also go from headache to heaven in a heartbeat.